Mauser by Louise Erdrich. You had to know Travis Hopart not to like him, that was the thing. When people first encountered him, women especially, they thought they'd met a man worth meeting. The mustache was so trim, that reassuring dark brown, then the Christ-like eyes, clear as scorched butter. The whole of him was so regular-featured and even-toned that the voice was no surprise, warm and crisp as a newscaster's, telling mild jokes and deflecting any question you might ask. He bought me a drink on a night I needed one, a night I was down. You shouldn't be alone. And there he was. He wore a clean white shirt, short-sleeved. His forearms were tanned and muscular, the left one a darker brown from poking out the truck window. Hi, Travis. Where's your boyfriend? I told him, although he knew. That guy's crazy. Travis's defense of me was so blunt and sincere, I sort of believed in it, or at least appreciated that someone cared enough to put on the act. I'd been dropped for a woman who also worked for the firm. Travis had followed me into the bar to present himself as the consolation prize, except that he was pure liability. I pushed the drink away. I'm not going to do anything stupid, I swear, he said. He lifted one hand, looked at me, all solemn. I'm not going to do anything stupid either. He put down his hand and ducked his head, craned toward me as if he was looking into a small, dark room. To be honest, he rubbed his eyes as if to adjust his vision, and then put his fingers to his brow. I was kind of hoping that you would. You're getting a couple of gray hairs here. I touched above my ear. Distinguished. My wife says so too. That meant the bullshit was behind us. From talking to other women, I knew that once Travis mentioned his wife, the conversation got more realistic. I do appreciate you coming over, I said. Really, the drink and all. But anyway, what's new with you? With Mauser? All of a sudden, Travis looked depressed. His shirt wrinkled as his shoulders slumped. The expression on his face sagged. The lines along his mouth deepened, and his mouth pinched. A sour indignation formed. You might say I'd like to kill the guy, he offered. I just can't stand the type. My dad was like that, military-minded. Do this, do that. Well, he is your boss, I pointed out. Travis looked at me, all puzzled, like what did that have to do with it? Mauser and Travis had reached a kind of stalemate. Their horns were locked, and as they stared into each other's eyes, they pawed themselves deeper into the earth. Mauser had the edge some days, and Travis's purchase on their turf improved on others. From the outside, the match seemed hardly even. You had to know the background. The firm itself, General Road Improvement and Construction, belonged to Jack Mauser, a huge, flat-stomached Welsh German. Dressing down employees on the work site, he combined the drama of a Richard Burton delivery with raw Teutonic rage. His angers were explosive and foul, much feared, although his good favor was avidly sought as well. Mauser was a fair-minded man, but he had a streak of irrational vulnerability. He adored his one sister in the world, Rhonda, pampered her as though she made up for the wife and children that he didn't have. She'd married Travis, a laid-back, good-time boy with high school basketball trophies rusting on top of the TV, and girlfriends, lots of those. Rhonda worshipped him nonetheless, and she had to be protected. At least Travis worked where Mauser could keep an eye on him. There was no question of firing the man. And so Travis became as much a part of things as anyone, even though his only job was to haul gravel, asphalt, sand, whatever was needed. Travis worked with false eagerness, expending a lot of visible energy, jumping in and out of the cab, kicking tires, talking long and hard. But by the end of the day, without fail, he had always hauled by many tons the least amount. He would not have lasted a week anywhere but at Jack Mauser's. His brother-in-law knew this fact and hated it. The candy apple red Cadillac that was, besides Rhonda, the only thing in this world that Mauser truly loved, raised a gray plume of dust that hung in the air and turned ruddy pink, reflecting the morning sky. Sunrises in the dry autumn west of Sioux Falls were spectacular. We saw them all. At Mauser's, everybody, even the payroll clerks, started work at 7 a.m. and went until whenever. The push was on. There was so much to do before snow and the first hard frost. It was the best time of the year, in many ways, for Jack Mauser, who forced his caddy to feats of quick driving and exhorted, managed, raged from site to site, screaming at what was yet to be done as a contract deadlines approached. For Travis, of course, this time of year was the worst. No one around him had time to shoot the shit. There was an overriding panic in the air, an aura of strain. No one had time to sit and smoke or to drink a Pepsi from the cooler on the passenger side of Travis's truck. People kept their ears cocked, their heads turned. Mauser could spin out of nowhere, at any time, a streak of dire color. Charges had been brought against him 2 years ago. Assault and battery on an employee over a minor slip-up in the gravel-to-sand mixture. It was not just the drama of his rage people feared. It was the actuality of Jack Mauser's temper, the rock of his fists, the pleasure that anger gave him. I did my job well, so I never ran foul of him. He and Travis could kill each other and be done with it, for all that I cared at the time. My office was at the far end of a trailer. I practically had my own bathroom, and nobody bothered me past 9, which is when I shut my door to drink a cup of tea with honey and stare into the screen of my computer. It was maybe noon, a day I was far into the payroll, when the trailer bounced on its concrete blocks and Travis walked into my room. "Can I be straight with you?" he asked. "Not if you want your paycheck." "I don't care about that. Here." He took a short chain from his pocket, bent forward, took my wrist, and snapped it on. There was a charm attached to the bracelet, a little silver bird. I looked at the thing as it rested on my wrist. It was the kind of gesture that just stops you. In the moment of my hesitation, Travis leaned over and put his lips right where a doctor takes your pulse. I spread my fingers wide and pushed his face away. "Get out of here," I said. But I kept the charm. Remember, I'd just been burned by a man without any. It helped to have Travis, so attractive on the outside, turn his attentions to me. People don't change, I told myself, so don't expect more. If he's flirting behind his wife's back, he'll do the same to you. This thing was stamped like a million others from a piece of tin, I told myself that night when I took it off. The next morning, before work, I put it back on. I'm not kidding when I say my former boyfriends had not been all that attractive. I go for the unusual in men, and people with good looks get generalized early in life, too well defined to have any character of interest. I needed character. You see, I am a person you cannot tell had surgery, had teeth fixed, worked very hard at looking nice. It sharpens you, growing up as the last person anyone ever noticed in a classroom. I guess I look down on pretty people, and I know that I was right about that if Travis was an example. Look how empty. He was living off his wife's brother's goodwill. At the same time, he was making moves on me. Look how vain. When he knew Mauser wasn't anywhere in range, he would kill the engine of his truck, get out, stretch. He always did this in front of my window in the accounts trailer. He made sure to stand within a woman's gaze, because it magnified him, warmed him. He fed like a bee on syrup, on female admiration. Given all that, why did I find myself thinking about Travis? Why, the day before Mauser came around to check the weights and measurements and sign the paychecks, did I protect Travis? Without letting him know, I changed his tonnage. I made him look useful. It was a kind of insurance that he would be kept on. I did this even though I knew that the yellow copy of the unchanged original was already over in the files in Sioux Falls. Files that sat around in cardboard boxes or served as coffee tables, true, but files that were accurate records. It got bad. I would wake up in the middle of the night, hungry. I had 2 rooms. I would walk into the other and open the refrigerator and stare into the cold, bright box, thinking of Travis Hopert. Those deep brown eyes, sad, but of course I would light them up. Those smooth arms taut with muscle. How did he get strong? He never lifted anything. I was reaching for the milk one night, a glass to calm me down and put me back to sleep, when the phone rang. I let it ring, but it sounded so loud, so unreal, that I picked it up and held the receiver carefully to my ear. "Please, I've got to see you." "Fine," I said. "Tomorrow." My voice shook as I put the receiver down. I waited. It rang again. "No," said Travis. "I want to see you now." Was it like I thought it would be? Worse. It was better. For me, those nights were like floating before you've learned how to swim. As long as I held my breath and stretched out my arms and legs, I stayed up. But when I needed to breathe, I sank in a swirl of panic. "I'm not the kind of person who can afford to get hurt," I told Travis. He murmured, turned toward me in a sleep I thought was fake. I leaned over him and pinned his arms down and spoke into his face. "Don't hurt me." "What the hell do you mean? You're hurting me." Did I visualize Travis ditching Rhonda, and him and me joining till death did us part? Did I pretend this role was satisfying? Did I need so little? Maybe I just wanted the chance to leave somebody first for once, to have the pleasure and not the illusions. They were all the same, though. Somehow I'd got it into my head that I meant something to this guy. Because it can happen. Cliches and love songs, roses, violets, little tin birds. Sometimes you can't think fast enough to keep them from getting to you. I was in my office around 10, waiting for the boss. I heard steps, the door opened, but it was Travis with a can of cold soda pop in his hand. "What do you want?" I was nervous, shut the door behind him. Travis put the can on my desk and then came around the side to pick me up. He wanted to put me on the desktop too. But I can make myself heavier than I look, and I slumped down, unwilling. He tried to pull me up, to push me, but it was lots of trouble, and he started to pant with the effort. "Come on, help," he said. I laughed. Then I heard the set of steps that for sure were Mauser's, and I twisted sideways. "Let go." He didn't. He held me in front of him and put his hands on me, looking over my shoulder in expectation, and that was when I saw he had decided on the spur of the moment to use me to get to Mauser. I was a prop, a plastic blow-up companion, a partner easily disposed of. His real relationship was not with me, or maybe any woman, but with Mauser. Like a dad to him. Like a brick wall. The door opened. I punched my fist against Travis so hard he grinned. Then I kicked. At once Travis fell away, doubled over in the corner of the room. I whirled around, but the door had shut, and already I could hear the red Cadillac accelerating. I didn't look at Travis. I sat down at my desk and rubbed my arms. They felt bruised and sore, and I was tired, so very tired. A wave of sleep washed over me, the sudden urge to sink against the desk, and it was all I could do to keep sitting upright. "Come on," Travis stood behind me. "It was a joke." He put his hands on my shoulders, began to knead the muscles of my back. He leaned over, put his hand on the desk for balance. I stapled it. I tried to, because of course I was too awkward to really get his hand under the black handle of the instrument. He backed off. "That was a joke too," I said. Jack Mauser fired me fair and square. I'll give him that. 2 days went by, and I thought perhaps he had been able to accept what only became true at the last possible moment, that I was resisting advances. He went back through the files, however, and found the figures that I'd falsified in Travis's favor. The notice was on my desk on Thursday morning. Be gone by 1. I left at 11. I was on the road leading from the site when I saw Travis's truck approaching. I could see it clearly. The cab was yellow and green. Crop colors. Garish. I have a small car, a compact, but I moved into the middle of the road. I'm not so different from Mauser. When I love someone, that's it. You can drive me past a limit, too. This feeling had been building in me for the past 2 days, a wild fever that made me throw things at the wall and slam the door of my refrigerator so hard the seal popped. Now everything felt right. This was the moment, I decided. Travis had had things too easy in life so far. I jammed my foot on the gas and kept going. The colors of his truck blurred. The road went by. Fields. Then we were too close. The grill of the truck loomed and Travis laid on the horn. I kept my hand steady on the wheel, locked my ankle, and Travis took the ditch with a full load of gravel. He hung up on the far incline. I saw this once I'd stopped and remembered to breathe. I got out and walked back. He'd been traveling slow enough to negotiate the declivity, but the ground was soft where water had collected a month ago, and at once his back wheels sank into the hard muck just enough to keep him where he was, so that he could not escape from Mauser's Cadillac, spinning its plume out at a distance and approaching fast. Travis got out and we looked at each other across the ditch. There was plenty of time to talk, but not enough to think of what to say. We saw Mauser screaming from his open window, and then at the crossroad he drove down into the shallow ditch. He rode its dry edges carefully, straddling the bottom until he got to Travis's truck and swung right up beside it on the driver's side. He jumped out with a crowbar in his fist. "Gun it out, fuckhead." You see a thunderhead building in the sky, a blistering rose color. You see boot camp sergeants in bad movies. Mauser's rage was a combination. It was a natural disaster mixed with dumb old saws. It was dangerous. His voice popped and sang in 3 pitches. His face went purple, and his neck bulged from the collar of his shirt. He puffed up like a bullfrog. Then he snapped. Travis jumped into the cab and restarted the engine, but his wheels spun the ruts deeper. He tried rocking backward, but he was too heavy. He tried forward, but the nose of his truck was at too steep a pitch. And as he worked, Mauser swung the bar in the air, stamped his feet, and yelled so hard it looked like he'd split in half. I edged back to my car. I leaned against the rear window and stayed, so I saw it all clearly. I saw the thought enter Travis's desperate head. I saw him think that he was simply too heavy. I saw him start the dump. The dump bed went up, but the tailgate had banged shut and did not release, so that the load, instead of flooding out the back, collected there. And slowly, I could see it happen, the weight began to lift the front wheels right up off the ground. Mauser hopped in the air, shrieked like the noon whistle, but the loud whine of the hydraulic dump in Travis's ears seemed to hypnotize him. Up the truck went, until the gravel began to course over the rim of the sides, and then it was too late for everything. We all saw it at the same moment, I suppose, though only Mauser moved. He leaped to the passenger side door of the truck and lifted his bar to break the window, but couldn't balance right as the truck settled back on its haunches and in slow motion listed sideways, groaning. Its shadow began to edge over the Cadillac parked snug against it. Then the truck went with its own weight and toppled the rest of the way, crushing the car. Suddenly Mauser stood on top of the door, which was a solid floor beneath his feet. He looked down. Through the glass he must have seen Travis, looking back up at him, and beneath him the buckled roof of clear red. Things gave deep in the Cadillac's interior, perhaps the wheel or the glove-leather seats. There was a thud, a series of smaller thunks, gentler sounds than that first awful noise of metal crumpling. I guess it was the smallness of the sound that stopped Mauser. He stood on the pile of truck and man caught inside and flattened car underneath. Then he straightened up and looked around, as though he'd climbed there just to get the view. He squinted at the horizon, which was empty and quiet beyond the edge of the field. When Travis began to thrash around below him, pounding to get out, Mauser bent over with the crowbar. I thought he was going to pull his brother-in-law out, save him if only to beat him up. But instead of breaking in the window, Mauser pried the handle off the door. Then he climbed down off the cab of the truck and walked toward me. Halfway to where I waited, he threw the iron bar down in the yellow grass. He kept the door handle in his hand, though, as if something would attach to it, and when we stood across from one another, he extended the handle to me, as if it was up to me to make sense of what had happened. "Is he okay?" I asked. He took the door handle back, and then nodded his big rough head. "Not a scratch." He walked around to the passenger side of my car. We both got in at the same time, and I began to drive away from the accident. When we stopped at the four-way light in town, I looked at Mauser for directions, and he looked back at me, giving none. So we idled there. One car and then another went around us, honking, and still we looked at each other for a clue. "You feel sorry for him? Think I should go back?" "No," I said. "Of course not. He was a mistake." "Okay, pull over there. I'm hungry." He pointed to a seafood quick stop. Obedient, I switched lanes and pulled in. About that time, I must have gotten tired of them all, because when the drive-up intercom wasn't working right, I said to Mauser, "You get out. You give the order. You're the voice of authority." He was a man of solid worth and deep attachments, Mauser. He had a temper, but I didn't have to fear it anymore. I just drove off. I was beginning to like this new habit of leaving men in odd positions. Last I saw, he was talking earnestly to a square of beige plastic under a sign that advertised the fried things you could eat that were trawled from the sea.